What happened to your first ever boyfriend/girlfriend? Write in the comments what you think about this. Enjoy the show. Story 1. She married a guy who seems to share a lot in common with me, both looks and interests. This was my first GF in elementary. My first adult girlfriend where we lived together ended up marrying a guy with the same name and similar looks, but he is way more of an asshole. She has sent me several messages once every few years asking to meet up with me when he is out of town. It's definitely a little sad, but I'm glad that I'm not with her because she was toxic AF. Story 2. We were both second graders, unfortunately putting on each other's magical indoor voice fairy dust and being serenaded by "We Will Rock You" at recess wasn't enough to stay together, and I left state. Also, they gave me a going away card that said, "I'll miss you, psych." Heartbreaking. And I never heard from them again. This was before email and cell phones. Who TF knows what happened to them? I wonder if they can even recall putting their sleeping mat next to mine. Oh, Mao. Story 3. We broke up mutually because she went off to college. She was a year older. She dropped out a month in. We hung out at a party and I got drunk. I passed out and woke up to her riding me with no condom. She didn't get off of me, so I pushed her off and she fell off the bed. Some people came into the room. She said I hit her. I don't remember much, but some of the guys hit me a couple of times and then kicked me out. A friend picked me up and I never saw her again. Years later, I saw she had 4 kids with 3 different dads and wasn't doing too well. She had a rough childhood, and looking back, she was just struggling with a lot of things. Story 4. He was mentally abusing me for 2 years, so I broke up with him. After that, he kept trying to pressure me into getting back with him for literally years. Even lied to me about having cancer just to make me come back. He became a stalker and knew about personal details in my life that no one had told him about. He even turned up at my doorstep. I blocked him several times, but he got 7 new SIM cards. Kept blocking his new numbers. I blocked him on Instagram, on my mail account, Snapchat, anywhere possible. But he kept making new accounts, and if he couldn't get to me, he even bothered my friends. Thankfully, by now, he seems to finally leave me alone. The last time he contacted me was about 2 years ago. I broke up with him 8 years ago. It was crazy, and there was nothing I could do about it, since he didn't physically harm me. I'm so glad it's finally over. I have no idea where he is now or what he does, and I'm not interested in knowing. Story 5. We were together for 8 years and living together, and he was very broke, but pursuing a career in the influencer world. I was paying for most of stuff and even let him take my car to work a couple times because his would break down and had no A key in the peak of Texas heat. Found out he had been taking a coworker home in my car, and they do stuff in the restroom at work and in the car. I met up with her eventually and found out that she knew about me, but that he portrayed me as a horrible person, and that they had lunch breaks together where he'd show her pictures of me and all the things he hated about me. A year after the breakup, he gets his big break in the influencer world and starts texting me again, and we go on a couple outings. Turns out he already had another girlfriend that was also an influencer, and he had cheated on her with me. I threatened to tell her everything if he ever contacted me again, so he blocked me on his and his GFS account. Every now and then I get notifications of someone trying to log into my socials, and I have a feeling it's him. Story 6. Had an online GF that I spoke to every other day. Sometimes every day we would game together and keep in touch. Made plans to meet up. Then I didn't hear from her for over a week. Got kind of worried. Asked mutual friends and she hadn't spoke to them either. Started to Google her name and didn't really see any results. Then an obituary came up, but it was her mom. Oh shit, she's been busy because her mom died. Then I noticed the news article. I don't remember if it was separate or linked in the obituary, but it said her mom was murdered. Oh fuck, her mom was murdered. That's even worse. I then saw the top of my girlfriend's head in an image, then scrolled down further to see her incredibly serious, glum face. She looked haggard and with a weight and seriousness that I'd never seen before. She had been arrested for bludgeoning her mom to death with an ornament. She also continued to attack and even bite her body after death. She went to prison and I never heard from her again. She's free now. It was a bit of a shock at the time, but looking back, there were a lot of red flags. She had some very strange things going on with her relationship with her mom. She came from a very broken background and had moved around to a lot of different towns. Story 7. We were college freshmen and fell in love in the dorms, and it's about as predictable as you can imagine. Both took each other's V card and were very much in love in the dorms. That first summer, reality hit us pretty hard with her going home to a completely different province halfway across the country and me off to my job at camp. We mutually broke up that summer via letters. I was at camp and had no access to phone, as we realized the distance and time had pretty much taken all the spice and enjoyment out of the relationship, and we were both ready to move on. I saw her next year and it was fine, but we both agreed we didn't want to pick things up again. That time had passed for both of us. The last I knew, she had moved back to her province, started a family, and now teaches music to kids. I hope she's had a good life, and I wish her nothing but love, happiness, and success. I hope she feels the same. Story 8. First girlfriend passed away in 2019 due to complications from a chronic health condition. This was a girl from high school in the early 2000s that I carried a torch for. We occasionally talked over the years, but life was just taking us in different directions. After a long time of no contact, we briefly reconnected several months before she passed. I thought I was over her before that. Now I think about her daily. Her family feels it an order of magnitude worse than I do, but I wish she was still here, even if we weren't going to be together. Story 9. She broke up with me around 9 months in, no specific reason, and I don't think either of us were particularly upset about it. We were 16, and I think we both realized we didn't actually have a lot in common. We remained friends during high school, but don't talk much anymore, but my mom is still good friends with her parents since we were neighbors. She dated a couple guys after me, got married young, like 20, I think, and has 2 kids now. They bought a house literally around the corner from where we both grew up, still hangs out with all our old neighbors and classmates. So her life is largely the same, it seems. I left the state for college, met a girl, moved again for a job, and got married last year at age 29. Story 10. I was a jerk who broke up with him and immediately went on a date with someone else. I could have been much nicer about it. I was 16 and entirely blinded by an obsessive, immediate infatuation for someone else. But that's no excuse for how disrespectful I was to him. I was still friendly with his family and caught up with him at his sister's wedding many years later. I was newly engaged to the guy I broke up with him for. He said it actually made it much better that said guy was my fiancé. It really was, that this was my person and not just a rando I dumped him over. We had daughters with nature names within a couple of weeks of each other a few years later, though he didn't stay with her mom. We catch up online here and there. Our girls have a lot in common, and we hope we can all meet up one day. He's always going to be special to me, and I wish him every happiness. He was a great choice for a first boyfriend. Story 11. We were teenagers. I had been sick on and off for months, with weird, vague symptoms. Finally had to get a lumbar tap to rule out blood cancer. He did not go with me to my appointment and avoided seeing me until I got the results of the test. No cancer. His explanation was, well, no one truly knows if the cancer is viral, and I have young siblings, I could not risk their health. We'd been rocky for ages, but that was the last straw. I broke up with him. He threatened suicide, showed up drunk at my apartment crying, etc. 2 months later, he, then 19, got his now wife, then 25, pregnant. Good riddance. Story 12. My first really serious relationship was with a woman who had been Miss at 21, a large industrial state. Either we were happy and dancing around like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, or else we were at each other's throats. We tried to make it work for years. Then she dumped me for a guy who was rich, and I was devastated, really devastated. Turned out the rich guy's family didn't like her, and after a while, he dumped her. Last I heard, the credit card companies had a lien on her house. I tried really hard not to smile when I heard that. Story 13. I went to a heavily Christian school, and I think my crush at the time was also religious. All I know is, years later I ran into him walking along the waterfront late at night, and he looked super guilty and freaked out when I recognized him. So I think he is one of those down-low gay Christians. I had a really intense, non-sexual dream about another BF, so I looked him up. Turned out he had passed about a year prior. What was weird is, although there was an obituary on the memorial site, it had no information. No cause of death, no surviving family, no personal information like his job or accomplishments, no social media presence. He was very troubled when we were dating, so I can't even imagine what that might mean. Story 14. He joined the Army after graduating high school. He got arrested and did some time in Fort Leavenworth. When he got out, he came back to our hometown, married and had a son with one of the most boring women I have ever met. They divorced and he moved to the SoCal desert where he now struggles with a meth addiction. Last I heard, he was sober, totally rooting for him that he still is. Story 15. This one is a doozy and recent. We dated about 8 years, but when she went to college, she left me for a guy who was more independent, wanting to get away from her dad. They've been together almost 10 years now. She had a kid with the guy she dumped me for. He's 6. She lives 4 blocks away on the same street as me. Starting in late May of this year, she knocked on my door to reach out. We exchanged numbers and started talking. It was like picking right back up as if we never split, but nothing romantic at first. She expressed being extremely unhappy and unfulfilled in her relationship with the other guy. Basically, he comes home and pays her no attention, shows little affection. Her job isn't an actual job because she doesn't do physical labor. He doesn't make an equal effort to keep the grass green, so to speak. Not to mention his alcoholism or his tendencies to smack her around and hit her. At first, it was me telling her if he doesn't want to make the effort, she can do better for herself than that, and she should. Over the course of the almost 2 months we spoke, all the feelings came back for both of us after all. We didn't split poorly, we just accepted our diverging paths in life. He'd get drunk and pass out. She'd want to hang out. We'd go to a park, the beach, etc., and I'd drop her off a few hours later. Or they'd fight. She'd walk out and ask me to pick her up somewhere to hang out. Fast forward about a month, and she ended up telling her current partner that she no longer wanted to be with him, that she was talking to me. This obviously blew up into me being hunted for, him apparently pummeling her for my address, showing up, causing a scene, which ended up with her being arrested for trespassing, but not the aggressive guy threatening to beat everyone up. Last I heard from her was she has been coerced into blocking all forms of contact with me. I don't know how she feels about everything right now, but I did receive contact from her parents, who she also lives with, and they are fully aware of the story and are on my side. For anyone that wants to tell me what mess I've gotten myself into, I'm totally aware of what happened. I am aware I'm a home-wrecking piece of shit, but I'll be damned if I say she's not worth it. I think it was worth it to hopefully get her out of a miserable and loveless situation. Nobody deserves to suffer abuse. Story 16. He had a complicated relationship with his mom and left me to be there for her. She lived in a different state. He immediately regretted it and tried to come back and told me he had never loved someone as much as me, but like, we were 18/19ths. It hurt so bad to be left the first time I didn't think I could trust him again, so I didn't take him back and blocked him on everything to protect myself, I guess. A few years later, his mom was arrested for trying to stab him. A mutual friend relayed this information to me. I kind of wanted to reach out, but I was already with someone else, so I didn't. We both married other people. He seems happy. I hope he is. Sometimes I wish we never dated and just stayed friends, which we were initially. Just friends, because I really miss the friendship we had. We got along so well and had so much in common. Totally felt like a kindred spirit, which isn't always easy to find. So much so, sometimes I wonder if we could have a conversation and hash it out and be friends. But it's been so many years and I know better than to do that. I loved him a lot, and he permanently altered my ability to trust people. Story 17. We called it off because a list of things I was unhappy with. I wanted to have a partner that enjoyed playing sports. She had 2 left flat feet. Her family was from Brazil, and they never spoke English. Same for her friends. I was already in college and didn't have time to learn their language, and I was frustrated to always be left out of conversation. She moved back to Brazil and does financing. Story 18. She broke up with me because I was an immature shithead back in those days. Didn't really take her on dates. Spent more time with my friends. She was head over heels for me, and I took her for granted. Absolute sweetheart. Fast forward to about 2018 or so, and Facebook suggested her to me. Not sure how they connected us since I'd never looked her up on there, and I hadn't spoken to her in about 20 years at that point. Curiosity got the best of me, so I checked out her page. She's married, has a family, and seems really happy, and that makes me happy. If I ever run into her again, I'd still apologize to her because she's a good person and I hurt her. Story 19. She broke up with me after I went off to college. Then she ended up attending the same college, which really sucked because I never really got over her. We vowed to stay friends. Then came the inevitable drift apart after I left college, and I never saw her again. Hate that I don't have a treasured memory of the last time we saw each other in person. I don't think we knew it was going to be the last time, so I don't think we had a real goodbye. Saw 2 old high school friends many years later, and they just dropped a bomb about what happened to Cassie. I was like, oh, what happened? Oh, she died. You didn't know? It was a gut punch. I hadn't seen her in nearly 30 years, but in the back of my mind, she was out there being happy. Now to find out she had passed away months before and I didn't even know about it. No one I knew had stayed in contact with her. She had gone on to earn an advanced degree, got married and had a child a bit later in life, and moved across the country. Things I found out from her obituary. No illness, just out of the blue, a deadly brain aneurysm right before her 50th birthday. There was no one to grieve with. My wife knew her, but also knew her as my ex, so she was never really a big fan. I texted one friend from back in those days that I still had contact info for. He hadn't been aware of her passing either. We bemoaned losing touch with those who used to be our nearest and dearest friends. Haven't talked to him since. That was a few years ago. Story 20. It's been so long it's hard to remember exactly who was the first I'd consider a first GF. Now that I think about it, there was a girl I spent recess with in kindergarten. It was kindergarten. I ran into her after HS. We talked about going on a date, but it was more to see if we'd left anything on the table. We didn't. After I was married and had kids of my own, I ran into her at a HS football game. Our sons were going to the same school. There was another girl, but that was elementary school. Have no idea whatever happened to her. Neighborhood girl. Went out for a year, still pre-HS. We broke up and she went out with another neighborhood boy. Last I heard, 40 plus years ago, she became a party girl and would regularly be screwing multiple guys at parties. Sad deal. Her dad was a cool guy. He'd been an engineer for BMW. We talked a lot about racing BMWs. Not sure where she went south. 8th grade, sweet girl. Blonde, big tits. She was awesome. I really liked her. We were great friends, too. Right before HS, she got into drugs. Not that it was all that bad, but it just wasn't where I was going. Summer vacation came. It was the year my flying really took off. I spent the summer flying with people all over the state. She went off the deep end. I saw her at my 30-year class reunion. She had jailhouse tats. She was missing teeth. She was trying to put her best foot forward, but she'd been ridden hard and put to bed wet. It was such a shame. All I could think about was that sweet, innocent girl I'd gone out with. As my wife and I stood at the bar and talked, she just said she was so happy I was doing well and complimented us on our beautiful family. Freshman year, hippie chick, my first older woman by 2 years. Emotionally, I was in way over my head. I was in bed with her one afternoon. I just came to the realization that I didn't have any feelings for this girl, and the only reason I stayed with her was because I was getting laid. She knew something was up and asked, "What are you thinking?" I really disliked that question. I made up some bullshit answer, but I think at that moment we both knew what was up. She had left some guy she used to say was too geeky that she used to compare me to all the time, saying things like, "So-and-so would never do this kind of stuff." We parted ways. It wasn't real clean. She went back to the other guy, got married, and I have no idea what became of her. Like I said, it's hard to say who was my first real GF. That covers the first 17 years of my life. Story 21. She's married to a cool guy and they just had a daughter. We were together for basically all of high school, but went our separate ways about a month after graduation because I was leaving for the Army and she was off to college. We didn't see or talk to each other for 8 years and then ran into each other at a wedding when we were 26. Briefly got back together, but realized it wasn't going to work long term because we had become different people. We still love each other, but not in a romantic way anymore. She's a dear friend to me, and always will be. I cherish the memories of growing and learning about love from each other. Story 22 married some Ukrainian model half his age, had a kid a few years ago, somehow got a bit famous from some video rant he made about war in his country. He's ex-military, and seems to have taken advantage of his 15 minutes of fame really well, helped propel his business pretty good as far as I can tell, and I think got a bunch of people to sponsor pay for him to go or finish a law degree. Story 23. We were both 14 in 9th grade but went to different high schools. Had a mostly friendship type of relationship. She had a lot of issues because of her parents. They were divorced. Her dad was an alcoholic and her mom was a hypochondriac, constantly leaning on her for support. She broke it off with me after about 4 months, saying she wasn't ready. I was a little hurt but moved on. We stayed in touch for a while, hung out a few times in high school. Strictly platonic. Then I moved to another state for college. About 5 years later, she finds me, writes me a letter, upset that I didn't tell her I'd moved. In hindsight, it was kind of dick move, but at that point, I found her very needy and I wasn't attracted to her anymore. She's also really sensitive, so I dared not reveal that information to her. She goes on to tell me that she was engaged, but broke it off because her fiancé was apparently verbally abusive. 3 years pass with some cordial correspondence. I sent her an invite to my wedding. She then confesses that she more or less had been waiting for me because I told her I loved her when we were 15. She said she tried to tell me that she loved me too, but I didn't listen. Again, I pulled my punch and more or less apologized and didn't confess it was just my male teenage hormones trying to just get to first base. I'm still married to my last college girlfriend, 20 years now, and she found a good guy, married him, and seems happy. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.